Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for coming here. It's not our first time at an event like this. Last time we were here about a year ago, and we were just starting to gear up, I believe, to our first phase 3 study, 2B/phase 3. And today we're actually ready to present some of the data from that study and some other data as well. Okay, this is handy. So we have been around for a while. Actually, we started as a company trying to break through into the area of mitochondrial disorders, specifically with the compound targeting mitochondria in its mechanism of action. So back then it was quite a controversial area, about 10 years ago. Now mitochondria-targeted compounds are becoming somewhat of mainstream. So we are kind of ahead of the competition in that area, which is good. Our compound is a small molecule, and originally it was developed as an anti-aging compound at the Moscow State University as a part of anti-aging project. It's specifically targeting mitochondria for protecting cardiolipin against peroxidation. And it targets mitochondria quite well. It was designed that way. It showed efficacy in terms of extending lifespan of multiple species of animals quite well, expanding lifespan by 15-20%. But back then, when we started the project, the goal was to try to commercialize the molecule for specific age-related disorders. And our company was based in Luxembourg, was established in Luxembourg specifically for that purpose. And over these years, it has shown to be a potent drug candidate for multiple age-related disorders and also a safe compound as well. We developed two formulations, eye drops, which we are developing for a variety of ophthalmic disorders. Most developed one is dry eye indication in our pipeline. And we also have a systemic formulation for disorders like NASH, Alzheimer's, and so on. As I mentioned, we have been around for a while, so our pipeline is kind of a mix between late stage and early stage development. The most developed one is dry eye indication with the ophthalmic formulation, eye drops specifically, where, as I mentioned, we just finished phase 2B/3 in the US. We named it Vista 1, and we are actually gearing up to start another study in about 2 weeks. For Alpha-1, which is a devastating vision-altering disorder, mitochondrial disorder as well, it is ultra-orphan disorder, and we completed a phase 2 study, early phase 2 study, phase 2A in Russia for that study, and we also have some exciting results for that indication. For dry AMD, we completed a few animal studies, and we're also ready to start a phase 2 in the US. For our systemic formulation, for the pill, we are targeting a couple of disorders like NASH and multiple sclerosis, which have relation to our mechanism of action, mitochondrial mechanism of action. And we have completed IND package for our systemic formulation for those disorders. Here is the molecule, and it's a small molecule, as I mentioned. It consists of two parts. The part on the left-hand side is the one that is responsible for scavenging ROS. It's a very potent antioxidant, and the one on the right, it's the part that is responsible for getting the whole thing inside mitochondria. So it's a charged part of the molecule. Understanding of the mechanism of action of our molecule has been kind of evolving throughout the years, and right now we understand three components to it. They all go through cardiolipin protection of cardiolipin from peroxidation. And that in turn protects the molecule from mitochondrial dysfunction, which is important for rare mitochondrial disorders, for example. Also, that protects the cell from apoptosis. That is important. That protection is important for disorders like Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, and so on. And somewhat unexpectedly, we found that protecting cardiolipin from peroxidation slows down inflammation cycle in case of autoimmune disorders, which is important for uveitis, multiple sclerosis as well. Basically, mechanism there is that inflammation induces release of cytokines in the cell, and then excessive ROS situation happens inside mitochondria, which in turn triggers more cytokines, and that's kind of what we think lies behind the whole autoimmune mechanism. Now, as you saw on the chart, the first indication that we picked for clinical development was dry eye, and I will try to explain why. First, obviously, it makes economic sense because dry eye market has been expanding for years, and now it's threatening to be about 7-8 billion by 2025, and that's quite a sizable market. Also, it only has 2 RX drugs on the market, which leaves space for another blockbuster. And those drugs that are on the market, they are actually very narrow. They have very narrow mechanism of action, and those are basically anti-inflammatory drugs. At the same time, dry eye is a very multifactorial disorder with inflammation being just part of the mechanism. And it also involves tear quality issues, tear quantity issues, degeneration of the glands, other tissue, and so on. So we're hoping that our drug, having multifactorial mechanism of action behind it, is a good answer to this disorder. Now, this is the study that we just finished this year. This is a multi-center study that we conducted in the US. And geography in the US was quite broad in terms of the centers. It was placebo-controlled, and it was about 2 months of treatment topically. This was eye drop formulation of our drug. So administration was 2 times a day over a 2 months period. It was quite a large study, about 150 patients per arm, 3 arms, 2 doses of the drug, and placebo. It's worth noting that placebo is actually, being our vehicle, it's actually artificial tear. So in a sense, we were comparing our drug to an active positive control as well, because artificial tear is quite effective against dry eye. So you can see the details of the visits at the bottom of the slide. It was an environmental study in terms of the endpoints. Those who know dry eye area, they know that there is a possibility of having artificially induced kind of dry eye situation with controlled adverse environment, which we also had at the end of the study, but the endpoints were environmental. Now, let's go into the interesting stuff. So once we opened the data, we immediately saw a lot of positive results, and it was positive from multiple points of view. First of all, we had very broad action of our active compared to placebo on multiple signs and symptoms at the same time, which is rare in dry eye studies. So we had effects for symptoms, for example, on ocular discomfort, on stinging, on burning, and those effects were all statistically significant. Also, for the sign, we had effect on a conjunctival fluorescein staining, which is, again, rare because conjunctival fluorescein staining is a subsum of multiple zones of the eye, which is a global sign for dry eye. And this is very well received by physicians, usually. Also, you can see on the right-hand side that time to effect was very short. we can see effect on ocular discomfort within 4 weeks of treatment, which is also very rare for dry eye. So that was very exciting. Basically, what we had to do was to pick the most optimal sign and symptom for our next study, which we did. And conjunctival fluorescein staining, being the global subsum, was the ideal candidate for our next study, VISTA 2. So that's what we're going with in VISTA 2, which is going to start in about 2 weeks. Enrollment of patients is going to start in about 2 weeks. Ocular discomfort, being a symptom with very short time to efficacy, was also an ideal candidate for the co-primary endpoint. So these are going to be our co-primary endpoints in VISTA 2 study. Now, statistical significance is good, but where does that put us in terms of potential effect on the market? We noticed that our most statistically significant symptom also was well explored in Opus 1 study that was done for Xiidra drug that is currently probably the latest novel drug on the market for dry eye. Xiidra at the moment has about $500 million, I believe, sales per year in the US market, and is assumed to be the leading RX drug prescribed by physicians at the moment. So that was a good comparator, and you can see that our drug achieves about twice separation from placebo as their drug in about a third of the time, in 4 weeks as opposed to 12 weeks. So that's a direct comparison within the same scale for the symptoms. So that was exciting. Now, we're hoping to get more data in front of you in about 6 weeks, 6 months for dry eye, but we also have other indications we're working on. So LHON, as I mentioned, is an orphan indication, devastating vision altering disorder that affects young adults, and we conducted this study in Russia. It's a fairly small study, but we managed to get a nice statistically significant effect on best corrected visual acuity. It was an uncontrolled study, but this kind of improvement from baseline for these patients is rare. This looks like a good indication of efficacy for our drug in humans, and we are thinking to start a phase 2 study in the US probably next year for this indication. We also have interesting animal data for our systemic formulation. As I mentioned, we want to go first with NASH and multiple sclerosis. This is data on EAE model for multiple sclerosis, which is quite common for multiple sclerosis. And you can see placebo in blue, and you can see you're supposed to see 2 lines at the bottom, but until day 26, the 2 lines, positive control and our drug, they go hand to hand, so you can not see the separation, which is good. So basically, our drug performed the same way that a steroid injection performed, suppressing symptoms of this model completely over the course of the study. Now, having that many indications in our pipeline, how do we handle our strategy? We decided to go with, to concentrate on systemic indications as our exit, as our end game, but use ophthalmic indications, our ophthalmic formulation, as means to get there. So having dry eye indication being the most clinically developed, we are hoping to out-license that indication this year or next year to a big pharma company, and we're hoping to use those proceeds to finance development of ophthalmic indications further, LHON and dry AMD, and also to finance our development of our systemic indications, of our systemic formulations further, probably raising more money for phase 2A in NASH and MS. Thank you.